the Workforce Connections podcast, where we discuss workforce development in Southern Nevada. Here's your host.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the WC podcast. Today, we have a really special guest, somebody you're all going to enjoy, the famous Chef Jeff from the Chef Jeff Project. Chef, welcome.
Good to see you, man. Listen, I don't know about famous, but the project that we've been doing lately has really been taking off, and I'm just honored to be here at Workforce Connection, not just to share my story, but talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in here in the city. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, we want to talk about all that. We met almost 3 years ago. I know pre-pandemic, thanks to Cecil Fielder, he was the first one that introduced us in this very room.
Yes.
And then, of course, we found out through the years that we've had lots of common friends, and Jack, and, on and on and on, Irene. And so grateful that you're here. Let's start by kind of those who don't know. I can't imagine there's many, but those who don't know Chef Jeff, tell us your story. How did the justice system change your life?
Wow, it's interesting. A lot of people around the country know me as Chef Jeff, but they don't know the story behind. And I had a non-traditional route to chefdom. I grew up in a traditional African-American family, South Central Los Angeles and Southeast San Diego. Many of the young black and brown kids didn't have fathers. Mothers worked a couple of jobs. They were low income. And like many young wayward youth, we make poor decisions. And I got involved with drugs and stuff coming out of high school and eventually landed in prison. And when I went to prison, I was very bitter. I blamed everyone, society for, my shortcomings in life. But I realized that it was a blessing. I turned federal prison into federal university, as I call it today. And I grew up in there. I went in when I was 23 years old, read my first book, got in the GED program, earned my high school diploma in about 3 years. But what was most interesting about the criminal justice system during that period, I was in federal prison. And federal prison in the 1970s and 80s was known as Club Fed. So we had some very high-profile convicts in there. Ivan Boesky, Michael Milken, Wall Street, junk bond, gazillionaires. And they taught business classes, marketing classes, public relations, even had a Toastmasters program in there. Wow. And they were very interesting to me. And because I wanted to really get into the insight in the mind of these multi-millionaire men, who were this extremely greedy. And they criminalized the gifts that they had. And as I began to build these relationships with these Wall Street guys, I began to see myself different. And one day the Wall Street guy asked me to share my story for about 12 minutes at Toastmasters. And I talked about how I became a millionaire at the age of 19, a part of my life I'm not proud of. And he came up to me afterwards. He says, "Jeff, you're a smart guy." I said, "What do you mean? No one ever told me I was smart." He says, "When you was in the drug business, you understood marketing, branding, public relations. You managed diverse workforce. You understood bottom line, transportation, and, all those different business acumen." And that was the big aha moment for me, where I realized that I can use my skills legitimately versus illegally.
That's awesome, Jeff. I think, people forget that when you're, like you said, in that business, it really, a lot of things do translate. And then you're helping young people know that the hustle translates to real life. As you said, managing people translates, managing transportation, even childcare, because everybody needs childcare. And
Absolutely.
So even in every business. So another thing you mentioned in there that I want to touch on is, our friend Jack always tells me he's from South Central LA, but
okay.
I know you're from the real South Central LA. Jack is from Melrose Place or something.
Are you talking about Cadillac Jack Martin?
Cadillac Jack Martin. But he's going to be watching us. But tell me a little bit more again about what is it like? Your story, this is why, by the way, and we're going to talk about it a little later, you're such a great keynote speaker because you have a powerful story that people can relate to, but more importantly, that can inspire. But tell us a little bit about, for example, now that you were able to take your skill sets, your God-given talents to make a legitimate life and live the life that you live. How is it? Do you tie back at all to that South Central friends, environment, neighborhood? Do you ever go back? How is that?
Yeah, absolutely. My umbilical cord will always be connected to the inner cities. Where I come from, it's where I cut my teeth. And I'll never forget, because people like myself who have succeeded and has been able to lead that life, we have to go back, right, to inspire, to share those strategies on how to achieve their own version of the American dream. So I'm constantly in the streets, in inner cities, not just in South Central and San Diego, but right here in Las Vegas. That's my home for the past 21 years, doing the critical work I believe is necessary so we can close that social and economic gap that we have in this country.
Let's go to chapter 2 now, because again, this is, as we've now become friends, we've learned about each other. We were walking in the same hallways of the Bellagio for years. We just didn't know each other. You ran there, the cafe. We talked about the iced tea ice machine that I used to have to go fix. And but again, through us knowing each other, I found out you worked on the high level, kitchens of the Strip, and you've know firsthand what it's like to, what skills are needed for that high expectation service of the customer first in the Strip. What else did those years in those kitchens teach you?
Yes, interesting. I learned a lot, working here in Las Vegas. And I remember prior to coming to Vegas in the year 2000, many people told me from LA, don't go to Vegas, Jeff, they're not going to hire you, And I remember catching a flight out here, and I stayed at the Jockey Club, the one hotel that never sold out to the big investors. They're still there, by the way. And I stayed there. And I started at Mandalay Bay and worked my way all the way down the Strip applying for jobs, and everyone turned me down. My goal was to come here to work for the Bellagio, the big B, the Bentley of them all, I call the place, and everyone turned me down. And my wife was like, honey, what about Caesars? You haven't applied at Caesars. And I said, well, I really don't want to work at Caesars. And she was, why? I said, well, in my former life, when I was a drug dealer, I used to play there. I used to gamble there. I used to go to the prize fights, and I just felt uncomfortable. And so when that time came to go back to Vegas without a job, my wife went behind my back and sent my resume. And there was a chef by the name of Jim Perello and Greg Waldron, who was the vice president of food and beverage, who asked me to come in and interview because my resume was pretty impeccable from LA, from the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, Bel Air, L'Ermitage, and he gave me a shot. And I remember that chef asking me, he says, Jeff, have you ever killed anyone? I said, no, sir. He said, can you cook? I said, yes, sir. And I came in the next day. I did a 6-course tasting, but I actually did 7 courses because as a formerly incarcerated person and someone who never been in culinary school, I always felt that I had to do more than the average. And I remember up in banquets where we did this tasting, banquets have that ugly bone white china, and I had came in before the other chefs to do their tastings, and I went to every restaurant from Nero's to 808, and I took some china, and so I wanted each one of my dishes to have its own identity. And I remember the chef saying, Henderson, where did you get that china from? I said, well, chef, I came in early and I went around to all the restaurants and grabbed some plates because I really wanted my food to be exciting. And so that was my entree in. I got the job and became the first African-American chef de cuisine running a Appalachian buffet, Cafe Lago. But what I learned mostly at Caesars was the power of relationships, the power of knowing how to manage diverse work crews. And Vegas is a melting pot. And in many kitchens, there's black and brown and even white people in those kitchens, but mostly come from low-income backgrounds. So with my experience managing kitchens in prisons, coming from the streets, there was a human connection. There was a cultural and emotional connection between executive chef and the dishwashers and the cooks and the servers. So I spoke a unique language. I was able to motivate and uplift and encourage these guys to say, hey, I've been here 6 months and now I'm the executive chef de cuisine. And these guys, some of these guys have been here 20, 25, 30 years. And I'm saying, why not you? And so confidence is one of the biggest challenges people coming from underserved communities have envisioning coming to the Las Vegas Strip. They fear the Las Vegas Strip. They focus on local restaurants and casinos in downtown because they don't have the confidence or feel that they have the skill level enough to get on the Strip. And so that's my goal, is to disrupt that and say, hey, if they can do it, you can do it.
Chef, and just for the clarity of our viewers, you did return those plates, right?
I did return those plates. So I had to use some of my old street strategies, but I won. It made it happen. I didn't take them out the building, though. I kept them there.
But we've been witness to everything you've been talking about. When we visited the Chef Jeff Project Kitchen in North Las Vegas, we organized a dinner for some of our board members.
Yes.
And we want to do another one for those who didn't get to attend that are listening now. But you did a multi-course meal.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, go to your events on Saturdays when you're fundraising to run these programs, and you're selling the Dirty Bird chicken and you're selling the jambalaya, But again, not many people know, or maybe a lot do, but you don't do it often. You can go and sear some foie gras and put that on a nice tomahawk, and you can do the, the deep dive scallops and caviar, and so you can go from zero to hero in what, 4 seconds?
Yes. Well, it's interesting, Jaime. I love food, and not coming from a traditional food background, I was introduced to food in prison. And so I was on a dishwashing crew, and I realized that inmates got to eat better than the rest of the inmates if you worked in the prison kitchen. And I just got good at it and fell in love with it. And it became my passport to the middle class coming out of prison. And so I knew in order to get to that level of chefdom that I wanted to be in, I had to diversify the types of cuisine that I cook. And my background's in California French, which is a lighter version of classical French cooking. So I don't really do the heavy sauces like we once did. So it's mostly infused oils, infused waters, a lighter approach, smaller dishes of food, multiple courses. And so which is interesting, even at the Chef Project, where we work with system impacted young kids and workforce development, is I introduced these kids to like duck fat diver scallops, a big 42-ounce prime tomahawk steak. They never had these before. Chilean sea bass, salmon, caviar. Never had a French baguette before, white asparagus, various types of lettuces. And I remember when I worked at Bellagio and Caesars, you had to take a test. And on that test, they would ask you as a cook, can you name 5 different lettuces? Can you name 5 different mushrooms? 5 different oils? And so I said, this is the information that people from underserved communities, whether adults coming out of the criminal justice system or youth, we have to educate them about this. So I said, why not let them taste it? Why not get them to fall in love with multiple lettuces and things like that? So it makes that opportunity more attainable when they go on the strip seeking work.
Absolutely. I love what you, when you describe your program, it's changing people's lives through food,
Yes.
And so let's go to chapter 3, when I think was a pivotal moment in your life changed. And it was not a lot of people get to sit down on Oprah's couch, A lot of us have seen you on TV and now YouTube, because that happened a while back. But there you were on national TV on Oprah's couch, where she has prime ministers and royalty. And so tell us a little bit about what do you remember most? That must have been like, it must have gone like lightning, right? Of course, you've watched the actual program, but what do you remember most about that experience?
Wow, that experience, meeting Oprah and getting an invite was surreal for me, because I never chased fame and fortune. I never chased television, to write a book. I never had a publicist. I never had a manager before. And how this all happened was just unbelievable. One day I get a phone call. I'm working at Bellagio Cafe. Bellagio, and the phone rings. A guy from New York. He's a culinary agent. And he says, Jeff, I read about your story on a blog from Karen Page and Andrew Dunningberg. They wrote a book, a bestseller, James Beard Award-winning book called Becoming a Chef. And he says, I've never heard a story like yours. A guy who used to, cook drugs, and again, part of my life I'm not proud of. He used to cook drugs and then became a prison chef, and now you're one of the top chefs at Bellagio. He says your story needs to be told. He says, if I come out to Vegas and I help you write a proposal, are we in business? And I said, sure. He came out, we wrote a proposal, we went back to New York, and my book project went into auction. All the top publishing companies in New York were bidding on telling my story, because at that time, Anthony Bourdain was the bad boy of cuisine, and so he talked about the underbelly of Americans' kitchens. And so here I was, even though Anthony Bourdain never been to prison, he was a drug user, I was a drug dealer. And so there was some parallel between both of our stories. And then we got the book deal, we wrote the book, and Mike called me back. I was still at Bellagio. He said, Jeff, you're not gonna believe this. I said, what's that, Mike? He said, you're going on Oprah. And I was so excited, only because I wanted to cook for her. I wanted to show the world that I was more than a great story, that I can really cook. And I know she's a big foodie, but the producers wouldn't let me cook. So I was a little disappointed and flew to Chicago. And when I walked out, and got on that couch, I was extremely nervous because I really thought that she was going to beat me up about my drug dealing past. And, you know, and the conversation was about resilience. The comeback kid, people who never give up, who continue to fight, who keep pushing on no matter what, who learns from failure. And she compared my story to hers. And when she held my book, Cook, which I brought a copy here today, she held that book up, Cook, From the Street to the Stove, One Man's Journey. What happened after that was this a dream come true. You know, television shows came, movie deal with Sony Columbia, Will Smith, Food Network, the Chef Jet Project, which was the launch of this vision that we have here in Las Vegas. And then public speaking came, and just the platform. And I realized today, 15 years later, that Oprah wanted to give me a platform. And she told me at the end of the show, she says, "You're a true inspiration to little black and brown boys." And now they have a mentor. And so that was a call to action for me. And so I've been doing the critical work since I've been here for 21 years, but also helped co-found a chapter of the Teenage Awareness Program in federal prison that we call TAPS. So I've been doing this work for about 35 years. And so launching of the Chef Jet Project locally, which is a nonprofit 501c3, this is God's work. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my pay it forward. This is my meal ticket to heaven. Yep. You know, so it's not about, it's never been about, you know, creating a legacy. It's what I've been doing. Even when I was at Caesars, you know, I successfully got 40-something plus formerly incarcerated people hired there. And one day Jim Perello and Greg Waldron called me into the office, and they took my hiring privileges from me. They said, "Jeff, we love what you're doing in the community, but we're not a rehabilitation center." Because the last guy I tried to bring in had went to prison for 15 years for bank robbery, and Cafe Lago was right next to the main vault. So somebody was triggered to do a serious background check on this guy. Yeah. And so many of those guys and gals did well, but there were challenges. You know, the confidence level, you know, young people coming into the casinos who have never worked with people who come from different lived experiences, never worked with white people, never worked with Jewish people, never worked with Asian people. So they had some challenges. And this is why it's important with employment readiness training and workforce development, is that we really teach the life skills that will allow them to sustain the job once we get them employed in our industry here in Vegas.
So Jeff, what other books came out of? So let's go to the next chapter. You're on Oprah. This was your first book, but there's been other books after that, correct?
Yes. Yeah, interesting. I've been blessed with 4 book deals. After I wrote Cooked and then went to the New York Times bestseller list, I was blessed with opportunity to write my first cookbook, Chef Jeff Cooks with Scribner. And so I put together like was 135 recipes. That book came out, was very successful. But one thing the publisher didn't know, there was probably half of the recipes were prison recipes, right? I just changed the china and tweaked the ingredients and made the food look really sexy and really good. But that was the foundation of my food. You know, we made meatloaf in prison. We did fried chicken, baked chicken. We had various rice dishes and starch dishes. And I always tell guys coming out of prison who want to come in this business, so the only difference between prison cuisine and gourmet cuisine is the china and the ingredients.
I remember first time I tried correctional cake.
Yes.
And then I can't remember what you called it, but that was federal fried chicken, but it was something like, it was all tasty though.
Yeah, so we have a couple signature dishes that we do. We do correctional cinnamon rolls, correctional cake, which is a scratch cake made in a sheet pan. So it's only this thin, and you can get 72 square cuts out of a large industrial sheet pan. So you do the math. If there's 1,500 convicts on the prison yard, then that's how many sheet cakes you have to make. So the squares are about like this. So you get 72 cuts out of that, right? And then the chicken. Every now and then we were blessed with an opportunity to have fried chicken in prison. So the 5 ingredients, I added 1 since then, is the signature correctional fried chicken that we offer for donations over at the project, along with cinnamon rolls, cookies, and different things like that.
Saturdays and Sundays. So multiple books, but you've also had experience on doing TV shows. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. You know, first came the book deal, then came Oprah, then the movie deal with Will Smith, Sony, and Columbia. And then I got a call 2 weeks after Oprah from Bob Tushman over at the Food Network, and he was a senior VP of programming. And he said, Jeff, we love your story. We saw you in Oprah. We want to do a cooking show with you, but we don't know what that is. And I was just blown away once again. And I said to myself, I said, what can we do? How can we use food to impact people, young people? How can we use food as a therapeutic tool, as therapy to bring young kids who are involved with gangs, who come from poverty, who are failing in the public school system, use food to kind of tie them together? And so I came up with the Chef Jeff Project, where I launched a catering company in Beverly Hills. And I took 6 at-risk kids off the streets of South Central, a diverse group of young people, and launched a catering company. And the reason why I chose Beverly Hills is because I wanted to expose young people from the inner city to middle-class values, to wealth values. I wanted to take them in multi-million-dollar homes. I wanted them to see the possibilities if tapping into your gift, your strengths, you know, taking those skill sets that you may have used in crime as a transferable skill. And that show, we got 6 episodes, 1 season. Then it led to another cooking show called Family Style with Chef Jeff. It was geared around young kids, teach them the healthiness of cooking. And then I got another show on the Game Show Network called Beat the Chefs, where myself and 2 other pro chefs competed against family cooks. And we got our tail whipped quite a few times. We lost against quite a few families because you just can't beat a grandmother who has been making scratch Granny Smith apple pie for 50 years. We made it fancy, sexy. We had the nice china, but she had that flavor. She had that touch there. And my final show was a show called Flip My Food, where I traveled middle America and the South with a food truck. And I flip food, right? Cut fat, boost flavor. And so I was able to meet a lot of different cooks and families who were in the food business all around the country. And I continue to learn and be a student of that. So every show that I've ever done, all of my businesses and things are all tied back to community. It's always been about community. And so even the community here in Vegas have supported us, are standing behind us, or helping us bring our vision, especially you guys here at Workforce Connection. Those opportunities that you guys have given us to come over there and facilitate meetings gives our kids confidence. It gives them hope that you guys care, and then you create an opportunity for our kids to work and get real lived experiences in the kitchen as well. One last page on chapter 4, Chef, before we move to chapter 5. Tell us a little bit about that movie, Will Smith. Wow, that was funny how that happened. So, you know, I learned a lot of middle-class values working at 5-star, 5-diamond restaurants. I mean, coming out of prison, you know, I had to polish myself. I was pretty buff from lifting weights in prison. I didn't smile. I had the mean mug, and I had to learn to smile. I understood that everything about me had to say brand, brand, brand. And so, I clean-shaved my face. I got my grill fixed. If folks who don't know what a grill is, it's your teeth, okay? Had to get my teeth whitened. I started getting my hands manicured. I went out and got the Bragard chef coat with the B here. It's a French coat made with Egyptian cotton, because all the top chefs wore that. And so in order for me You stand a different way too. I had to stand a different way. I had to walk a different way. I had to start wearing tighter pants because I had to mimic the culture that I wanted to be a part of. And that is so important with people who come from social and economic deprived communities, is that a lot of those subcultures don't blend in with the cultures of the Strip. So I have to say sometimes minorities, people who've had barriers to success, we have to chameleonize ourselves to create those opportunities and get access. And so I was in New York, in Times Square, the phone ring, and also my vocabulary had shifted, right? So the phone ring, I answered the phone very corporate. Great afternoon, Chef Jeff, may I help you? And there was a voice on the phone said, hey, Chef Jeff, how you doing? I said, fine, who is this? He said, this is Will Smith. And I said, come on, man, who's playing on my phone? Then my agent was in on the call on the 3-way, and he says, Jeff, this is Will Smith. Then I went hood again. Hey, man, what's up, Will? Yeah, I got real cool, right? Because Will's a rapper from Philly. And he says, I saw you on Oprah. We have your books. I'd love to meet you. And I was just blown away again, you know, how everything just happened. Didn't never chase the movie deal, television deal, book deals, anything. It just came natural. And he was up in Brooklyn filming I Am Legend. And so he sent his driver to pick me up. I went to the set in Brooklyn. It was a huge warehouse, a armory where he was filming the movie, and he had a trailer like a half a city block long, virtual reality golf course in there. So I walked in, and so I was just analyzing the room. I'm looking around. I saw lots of copies of my books, and then all the top movie producers coming in: Steve Tisch, Jason Blumenthal, Todd Black. These are the guys who do all of Denzel's and Will Smith movies. And then an hour later, Will came. And he came in, was really cool, was real skinny, brought the dog. And I was there. German Shepherd, yeah. And you know, I was all by myself. You know, my wife was at home taking the calls, setting up these deals were coming in. And I met him, and I spent a whole day up there. And we talked about my story. And he said my story was important, right, because it had a good ending. You know, most drug dealer movies wind up with the person dead, family being slaughtered, you in prison the rest of your life. But it was important about my movie project is that it highlighted a lot of the issues that we have in inner city communities today: teenage pregnancy, gang violence, drugs, the prison pipeline, mass incarceration. And so throughout my movie, it would demonstrate, it would show and shed light on that single parent home, lack of opportunities, lack of education, how that leads to the school to prison pipeline, and why we have, you know, 1 out of 4 black males from the ages of 17 to 28 in prison. 1 out of 12 Hispanics are in prison because so many of us choose illegal hustling in order to put food on the table. And so that's how the whole movie deal came. By 5 o'clock that evening, I had a motion picture, multi-million-dollar movie deal, and I was like, I can't believe this. It was like unreal, Jaime. It was like, I'm just a homeboy cook. You know, I'm just managing a kitchen. It was a $30 million a year grossing kitchen, but it was. And so that's how I got here, man. I'm humble. I'm extremely blessed for how I've been embraced, you know, around this country and all the opportunities I've gotten. I don't take anything for granted. And so it really moves myself and my family is that we self-funded our nonprofit. You know, we put a lot of our retirement investment money into this. And sometimes my wife says, honey, we got to stop. I said, no, honey, we got to keep going. I made a lot of money on the streets. I put a lot of drugs on the streets in my former life, and this is just giving it back, man. This is just paying it forward, and we work extremely hard, and we're grateful for all our community partners like you guys at Workforce Connection, Jack Martin, 8 District Courts, and all the people who come and support, who buys our prison chicken and prison cinnamon rolls and prison cake. So we're grateful, man, and we're proud of the work that we're doing.
Every weekend, yeah, and we've gotten to that chapter. Chapter 5 was really all about the Chef Jeff project, the current one here in North Las Vegas, that ghost kitchen that gets busy every weekend, again, yes, with delicious food, people coming in, again, bringing in funds to run this project and change the life of these young people. So tell us why this project is, again, so if you go there, you can see the passion around it, not just in you, but in your wives and all the other folks that go there and throw in a hand and are making it a reality. Tell us why it's so special to you.
The Chef Jeff Project is special to me because it gives me an opportunity to share my lived experience. We're talking 40 years of lived experience, 10 in prison, 26 being free in the workforce, and some of my childhood. And it's important that people like myself who share the lived experiences of some of our hard scrabble youth that may be justice involved, who come from poverty, young teenage mothers, to hear from someone to say, if he can do it, I can do it. And I give them the insider secrets of how to navigate the biases, conscious and unconscious biases in the workplace, how to interview, build up their confidence. We do a 30-second steer down in the kitchen, right? So some of our kids who have low self-esteem, they won't look you in the eye and talk to you. So we do a steer down. So they don't blink or turn their head, to steer down someone that might be in a position of authority. And so as we build their self-esteem and confidence up, we know that they're ready to go out there to interview and to sell themselves. Public speaking is a big part of our soft skill training, right? We don't really do resumes. I've never written a resume in my life. I stay in my lane. I say the best resume is what comes out of your mouth, how you sell yourself to that employer. And so using food, the relationships that I have in the great city of Las Vegas that has, is the culinary hospitality capital of the world. And so we thought it was the right time in the middle of the pandemic when kids were not in school, working from home, suicidal thoughts, and getting in trouble. So let's open up a kitchen to start feeding these kids. We serve as a safe place. We also serve as a hot food desert, right? Because all our kids, we feed them. Kids come in who's not part of the program, want to meet me. We have food there and things like that. So I think the timing was just right. And so I'm just so excited that we're able to offer this workforce development piece to all the other great organizations here in the city that work with this population of people, from Hope from Prisoners to Nevada Partners folks over there to FIT, to all the other organizations who are doing this work. And I want to say that everyone just needs to be supported, work together as a unit with one goal, one mission, is to close the social economic gap for all people in the great state of Nevada.
And we're going to talk about in our final chapter 6 how we can do that, how people can get a hold of you. But I'd like to share with you that when I was, again, there, and I've been there several times, but that especially the night that I got to take my board members,
Yes.
Mary Beth Sewell from the Vegas Chamber was there, Jerry Merritt from Bank of Nevada, Cecil Fielder from Keolis Transportation, of course, our friend Jack Martin from Clark County Juvenile Justice, Linda Parvin from Dieter was there, I think. And I hope I didn't forget one of my board members because, but we're going to bring more.
Yes.
But that night, I saw what you just described. And I think that's the power of going to the kitchen. Many of our listeners go there on a weekend, meet the kids, but you hear their stories. And some of them were really tough stories. The barriers they face is not just I don't have transportation, I don't have a home, I'm sofa surfing, I've been victimized.
Yes.
It's very severe trauma.
Yes.
And so, and I saw what you're talking about, how there was something about you that those young people could relate to. They were looking at you, really listening, really taking in, not just how to plate a dish or present it or make sure the sauce tastes right, but as you said, they were listening to how to posture, how to engage with the guest, and how to follow through and take pride on what they're doing.
Yes.
What is it that makes that connection? That why do they listen to you?
Interesting. It's natural. There's no script to this. There's no curriculum, no manual. Is that when I look at these children and they look at me, they see a big homeboy. They see an uncle. They see a father. And I never put myself on a pedestal. They've researched me. They know I've been on television. They know I have a movie deal. They know I've written books. But what they really know about me is that I'm no different from them. I've walked in the shoes they walk from. Single parent home, lots of trauma, PTSD, being incarcerated, being denied my version of the American dream at one point in my life. And so when they have that emotional connection to me. I call them son. I speak to them. I buy them shoes. We buy them uniforms. We feed them. We give them food to take home. They all have my cell number. Sometimes my wife will be like, honey, you give too many people access to you. You can't have all these kids. I said, honey, who else are they going to call? So they all have my cell phone number. It rings off the clock all the time. And so I don't see myself as a celebrity. I don't see myself as some guru. I'm just a homeboy who, with food and hospitality industry, gave me a second chance, like Las Vegas. And by the way, I want to give a big shout out to MJ Maynard. She was executive vice president of food and beverage at the Hard Rock. Yep. And she took a gamble on me, hired me as exec chef of AJ's Steakhouse, and a phenomenal leader who had no biases, who didn't judge me for the fact I've never been to culinary school and I've been in prison. And she gave me a chance, and she's a big supporter of the Chef Jet Project. You may not see her over there all the time, but she's around. She pops in unnoticed every time when she comes in, just to say, I'm proud of you, of what you're doing. And so it's important that the city, you know, and the folks here in Vegas, you know, get behind what we're doing. We are 100% volunteer at this time, nonprofit. Nobody gets paid. You know, every nickel and dime that I hustle up every month to keep the lights on, to put food, we're scratch cooking. So we don't get a lot of food donated from food banks. You know, we cook, you know, we season, you know, we build layers of flavor. I even take the kids with me sometimes to the grocery store to teach them how to grocery shop, how to pick, you know, watermelons, how to pick bell peppers and things of that nature, even down to how do you put your food in a grocery basket on the cart, the conveyor belt, that you keep everything organized, dairy with dairy, breads with breads, produce with produce, you know, meats with meat. So when you get back to the kitchen, you know that these bags you grab have all the protein, these bags have all the vegetables. And when these kids go into the grocery store, they don't really know how to push the cart. They're standing up on it. They're pulling the cart versus pushing the cart. And they just lose their mind, especially when I take them up to Whole Foods and they see orange juice is like $8.50. They're like blown away. I spend so much money on fresh squeezed orange juice. They just drink it down like water because they've never had that. They don't get access to that. And so this is why it's just important to expose. When we expose these kids who come from poverty, who come out of the foster care system, who've been sexually, mentally abused, but gifted, I mean smart, and they listen, they follow directions, but it has to come from someone who understands them because they've been beat down their whole life, told that they weren't smart, they were gonna wind up in prison. Many of these children, fathers are in prison, you know, mothers in the prostitution and drugs. A lot of our kids are born addicted to drugs, you know, so they have some challenges, but they are employable, you know, if companies are willing to invest in developing the whole human being.
Yep. And we're going to, the next our question is going to be key, I think, Chef Jeff, but MJ is a huge friend of Workforce Connections. Yes. You know, MJ, I'm sure you didn't think you were going to pop up in this show, but I was just last week, we attended the Latin Chamber Gala together, and I found out MJ's a great dancer. So, you know,
okay.
Yeah, MJ.
Salsa or what?
She was salsing over on the floor. So MJ keeps surprising us. We love you, MJ. So, but Chef Jeff, so all of this story, I think, is something obviously that's been told in much greater platforms than this one, including the Oprah show, because it's powerful. And so those who have listened or are seeing us on our YouTube channel, how can they get involved? How can they be a part of what you're describing, these young lives and changing that for a better? How can they get connected to the Chef Jeff Project?
Well, we're actually located in North Las Vegas, Pecos and North Las Vegas Boulevard at the 4D Commissary, right? We have a ghost kitchen. Our website is thechefjeffproject.org. And we do have some volunteers who come through, but we need speakers, we need mentors. And I don't try to put just formerly incarcerated individuals in front of these kids because we grew up our whole life with people who have been to prison. You know, we need diverse groups. We need Jewish folks, Muslim folks, wealthy folks, HR managers, presidents, CEOs of corporations that are diverse in their lived experience to come through. So please reach out to us to come and mentor. We never have trained more than 5 to 7 kids at a time. And so we're there 3 days a week, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday mornings when we do our pop-ups. And we're always seeking donations, whether they're cash donations or volunteer time, you know, things like that as well too. 100% of every nickel that comes into the Chef Jeff Project goes to pay for food, to pay the rent, and also to offer stipends to some of these kids sometimes. So it's very important. Come by, look at our books, see where every nickel and dime goes to, and we just appreciate everyone. And we know that this is just the beginning of a larger, bigger picture of what we're bringing to Vegas. We were recently awarded a $1.7 million EDA grant. And we also got an ARPA grant for $250,000 that's going to allow us to build the first in the nation, a mobile culinary and life skill academy. So we'll be able to reach rural areas in Vegas, pull up to the Clark County school districts, the 8th District courts to provide culinary and life skill workforce development training as well too. So we're really proud about this. We just picked up the first van in Michigan. It'll be here in 8 to 12 days, and it will have a custom instructional kitchen built on here. So you'll be seeing us around the city selling food so the kids get real lived experiences, workforce experiences. So we're looking for employers, especially in the hospitality. A lot of our kids want to go into construction. They want to do landscaping. So we just use food as a therapeutic tool to help develop them emotionally, culturally, and in the workforce. So we don't force chefdom on any of these kids. We just use the food to bring them together. And so one thing too, Jaime, before I let you go,
please.
I wanted to say, once we get these mobile culinary schools on the road, we will also serve as crisis kitchens. So when there's a first responder crisis, we'll be able to show up on the scene, feed our law enforcement folks, first offenders, first responders, but we'll also, when apartment buildings burn down, there's a massive crash and freeways are shut down, or God forbid anything happening on the strip or anywhere, we'll be able to pull up our culinary vans, and our students will be able to produce soups and sandwiches and hot food for people here in the local community. So that's American tax dollars at work here in North Las Vegas.
That's awesome, because you see programs, Chef Jose Andres, from Bazaar Meat, he does that after the hurricanes and stuff. Amazing that it's going to happen here. The two grants that you talked about were through the city of Las Vegas, correct?
Yes.
So shout out to our friends Lisa Morris-Hibbler and Tammy Malik from the city. They worked with you on those things,
Clark
right?
County as well.
Another one from
Commissioner McCurdy was a part of that as well too. And Jack Martin over at Juvenile Justice as well too. And then all the folks like yourself and people in the community who come and support us. It takes a village to make this happen. So we're going to continue the critical work and stuff like that. So yeah, great partners in the city. And so look out for us soon. We have a custom horn that I'm having installed on this truck. It's a 7-sound air horn. So when we hit that air horn, the Chef Jeff project is coming with some scratch cooking. And we'll be able to pull up here at Workforce Connection sometimes as well and serve the great folks here.
And so you have probably a pretty substantial air compressor there to drive that air horn.
Oh yeah,
right?
we have a great generator unit that's going to drive all the great things, and we'll have flat screen TVs on the inside the kitchen and on the outside. So we'll have the ability to virtually bring in subject matter experts to speak to the children, the students, and also share information and things like that as well too.
Love it. Last thing, I know and it's not the least of things, but those of us who've seen you on national stages, talking to rooms full of 2,000, 3,000 people, because again, this story is a very impactful one. So corporations hire you, national associations like the Association of Workforce Boards, Texas Workforce Commission, Florida, they all want the Chef Jeff story. And so if somebody listening who probably has a corporate event coming up, or they say, man, I have the right group that needs that inspiration, how do they get a hold of you to be a keynote speaker?
Wow. So, I have two websites. We have our nonprofit, thechefjeffproject.org, and then we have Chef Jeff Live. And I am a professional speaker. Once again, thanks to the platform. I'm blessed with opportunities to speak all over the world and to some great associations. I recently just came from Texas Workforce and spoke to 1,800 of their leaders throughout the great state of Texas, and our dear friend up in California, Workforce, as well, and our folks from NOB as well too. So I'm just humbly blessed to have work and for people to see value in what I bring to the table, which allows me to take care of my family, my wife and my 5 children. And I want to give my wife a shout out. I mean, STACY is the behind the scenes person. She's becoming a pretty good grant writer. Sometimes we're a little slow in responding, but we're going to get there. I told her this morning, I said, everyone's going to be calling you because you're learning from the mistakes that we make in building our organization. And so I want to give a big shout out to her as well. And also my children, who have been patiently waiting for Dad to spend more time with them because I'm servicing so many kids in the community, but they understand the work that has to be done. And so, yes, public speaking is at chefjefflive.com. And so I appreciate any opportunities to share, train, and facilitate workshops as well, too.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we put that information on the screen as well for our those who view us on the YouTube channel, but those listening as well. That I think that will be helpful. And we can have Stacy here on the show because she's Motown royalty, so we can have a show just for your wife, right?
Yes,
a great story.
Yes.
And I know I heard you say shout out to Bob Lanter from the California Workforce Association. Ron Painter and Mel Anderson from the National Association of Workforce Boards. They were really happy that you were able to be there and inspire their membership. So, Chef Jeff, did we forget anything? It sounds like it seems like it's been 2 minutes, but I know it's been longer than that.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, man. I mean, I remember when I first met you, I came over here and Cecil Fielder introduced us. I did my presentation, and you guys, because, you have a lot of folks come over and tell you about what they're doing in the community, but I knew I had to prove myself, and I wanted to show you all and all the great leaders in this town that we were very serious. And we're going on 3 years this summer. Imagine from that time. Wow. And I learned a great deal from you. Your passion for what you do. I think you're a very smart individual. You're a great foodie. And I remember us clashing a little bit over the menu. Right?
Yes, we did.
I'm telling my wife, I'm saying, this guy's trying to tell, like, what type of foie gras we should get. I said, he knows some food. And so food is a big part of, I'm going to turn the tables here a little bit. And how did food become such a big part of your life? Because I learned a lot from food as well, too. Yeah,
I think, as you know, growing up in South America, especially Peru, I don't know, I think you follow this kind of stuff, but the recent list of 100 top restaurants in the world contains 10 from Peru.
Yes.
That's 10%. And so
bragging now, right?
And you and I run into each other at Peruvian restaurants here in town.
Yes.
So, but I think that got exponentially grown when, like you, worked on the Strip. I was fortunate enough to work at MGM Resorts for 20 years. And that exposed me, to, that's why I'm surprised we never met. But, met some of the chefs at the restaurants. Yes. And I remember my favorite meals were not in the dining room, but they were in the back in the linen room where the silverware was. And chef would cook something and we would sit there on a little stool.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And they would tell me this is this and this is that. And like you said, layers. And I remember one of the chefs one time, and you make them too, those delicious short ribs that fall apart, with the reduction wine sauce. Yes. And I understood why you have to reduce overnight something, just to boil all that liquid out, the alcohol and just that flavor, that bubbly, creamy stuff.
Yes.
And so I think that's what made me really appreciate food and more just a vehicle to nourish ourselves, but an artistic expression as well. You guys are artists. You create, you innovate. And so I think that's why I fell in love with food.
Yeah. It's funny, at every restaurant, there's always a pot simmering in the back of the kitchen that the public never gets to buy, never gets to taste, which becomes part of the family meal for all the workers and stuff in the kitchen. And a big shout out to all the workers in the workforce hospitality industry here, because that's the driving engine behind this great city. And I'm just honored to be a part of it and to be here today at Workforce Connection podcast as well.
Chef Jeff, thank you for being here. It's been an honor. Thanks for being here with us.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's another episode of the WC Podcast. We hope you join us at the next one. Until then, stay safe. Chef Jeff, thank you for staying over for our bonus segment called Against the Wall. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So here we go. Here's the questions. We have 3 segments. The first one's called Your Favorite. So I'm going to give you a category, and you're going to give me your favorite in that category. You ready?
Yes.
Your favorite dish to prepare.
Correctional fried chicken.
Your favorite dish to eat.
Correctional fried chicken.
The favorite book you have written.
Stand Out by Marcus Buckingham, The One Thing You Need to Know.
The favorite book that you have read.
Cooked, From the Streets to the Stove.
Favorite subject in school.
Drafting.
Favorite movie.
American Gangster by Denzel Washington.
Favorite artist or musical group.
Kim.
Favorite holiday.
Christmas.
Favorite place to travel.
St. Martin.
favorite way to relax?
On the beach.
That's a great list. So, Chef Jeff, you made it through the first segment. Call your favorites. The second one is called Tough Choices. Are you ready?
Yes.
Would you rather vacation or staycation?
Vacation.
When you travel, do you stay in a hotel or an Airbnb?
Both.
More money or more time?
More time.
Live in a big city or a small town?
Small town.
Would you rather owe money or owe a favor?
Owe a favor.
Would you rather cook the meal or clean the kitchen?
Sometimes clean the kitchen.
Motown or rock and roll?
Motown, baby.
Motorcycle or automobile?
Harley Davidson's, baby.
Here's a tough one. Justice or grace?
Grace. Always grace.
Actions or words?
Words.
Good job, Chef. You've made it through Tough Choices, the second segment. The last one's called Finish the Sentence. Are you ready? I'm going to give you about 95% of the sentence. You're going to finish it for me.
Okay.
If Jeff could live anywhere, it would be...
California.
The best part of living in Southern Nevada is...
The Grand Canyons.
If Jeff could travel back in time, Jeff would travel to...
New Orleans, Louisiana.
The one thing Jeff will never regret is...
Good one.
Marrying Stacy.
I'm sorry?
Marrying Stacy.
Yes, marrying Stacy. Thank you. Got me on one. Go ahead.
Jeff's favorite thing about his work is...
Touching the life of a young child.
The young people at the Chef Jeff Project need help with...
Confidence.
Next year, the Chef Jeff Project will...
roll out the first mobile culinary hospitality and leadership academy in the country.
Awesome. Anyone listening can support the young people at the Chef Jeff Project by...
going to thechefjeffproject.org.
3 words that describe Chef Jeff are...
Focus, driven, inspirational.
And last question, Chef Jeff. Doing the WC podcast here with us today was
amazing.
All right. Well, thank you for staying.